diesel nightmare. Emily the single Stirling engine story. One day on the island of Sodor, Rosie finally took her last passenger train back to London Station. When she arrived at London Station, she realised that the Fat Controller was cross with her. "You're late, Rosie," he said. "You're late, Rosie," he said, and don't even think about dilly-dallying while you're late," he said. "It wasn't my fault, sir," said Rosie. "It was the points that keep doing it," she said. But the Fat Controller didn't listen, and with that he stormed away back to his office. But Rosie was meant to tell the truth, but the Fat Controller didn't know this because Rosie knows that it wasn't her fault. Meanwhile, Emily was making good time, but at the end she wasn't. The wind was making Kelly go too fast as she broke down, and onto the rails she went. Emily's driver and fireman applied the brakes, but it was too late, and Emily crashed into Kelly. Poor Kelly was really hurt, except Emily, and with that, Dennis came with the breakdown train to get Emily back on the rails and to bring Kelly some more repairs. The Fat Controller was so annoyed with himself as he said this to himself. "I don't know what's going on in this railway," he said. "I don't know why. I don't know why Rosie and Emily are late. Well, the reason why they're late is because they're just being silly. Daisy and Dennis normally finish their jobs on time," he said, "and they will always do." Emily was back on the rails, and Kelly was sent to the Sodor Steamworks to be mended. And then Dennis took the breakdown train away. And Emily was ready to go home. Night came, and the engines were still talking about the diesels. And the engines were still talking about the diesels. And then Emily said this to the engines. "The Fat Controller keeps saying that Dennis and Daisy are normally that quick with their jobs," she said. Well, what's he gonna do about it with us?" said Peter Sam. He might want to scrap us," said Rosie. "Indeed," said Emily, and all the engines agreed. And with that, Derek overheard. "It's about time," said Derek in his oily voice. "It's about time," said Derek in his oily voice. "The Fat Controller has brought me back because you steamies are useless and out of date." "What are you doing here?" asked Molly. "I am back," said Derek, "because the Fat Controller thinks that you steamies are out of date and useless, and now he will scrap you and take over the railway." And with that, Derek puffed away. Every night, all the engines can dream of. Every single night, The engines at Tidmouth Sheds could only dream. Every night at Tidmouth Sheds, all the engines can dream about is nothing but diesels. And with that, Emily had the worst nightmare of all. At the next morning, inside Emily's nightmare, the Fat Controller came to see Emily and said this to Emily: "Emily, it's time for you to be scrapped, and you're no use for and the diesels have taken over the railway, and you're no use for me anymore," he said. "No," said Emily. "Come on," said her driver. "We won't stay here. We'll run away." And so Emily did. They ran away, and she decided to pretend that the diesels aren't hearing her. She crept slowly, and suddenly, up here, she saw that Dennis, Daisy, Boko, and Salty didn't mind steam engines being scrapped after all. And with that, there was Toby on a truck ready to be taken for scrap. "Emily, help," she said, but it was too late. Dennis the friendly diesel took him away to be sent to the scrapyard. Emily knew she can't help him, or otherwise she'll be scrapped too. She crept forward, and at last, the only engine who she saw in the mud was Rosie stuck in it. "Emily," she said, "go, leave immediately." "I can't," said Emily. "It's dangerous, and I'm scared of the diesels, and the only chance is that I have to run away," she said. When she was about to pull Rosie out of the mud, Derek biffed her. Derek went so fast as he biffed her in a shake and a jump. "Bumbling trap! Bumbling bonkers!" shrieked Emily. There's a piece of scrap for you, Diesel 10, to take to the smelter's yard," said Derek, and so Diesel 10 and Derek captured her. The Diesels tried to push her, but she wouldn't budge, and so Emily bumped Diesel 10 off the rails and into the mud. And Emily ran away, but next to her was an old wishing well. "I wish everything was back to normal," she shouted, and it did. When the diesel nightmare was over, the next morning when the diesel nightmare was over, the Fat Controller came to see Emily again and said this to Emily: "Emily, go to the scrapyard." "I don't want to be scrapped," said Emily. "I'm not going to scrap you," said the Fat Controller. "I want you to go to the scrapyard to fetch Dennis, because Dennis has broken down, so I want you to do his jobs for him at the scrapyard." But diesels rule this railway in the entire earth," said Emily. "It will never happen on my railway," said the Fat Controller. That was the only thing I've told you, remember?" And so Emily did remember, and she became so happy that she was so glad that it was only just a nightmare, and it was. And when she told the engines, they had to agree too that it was a really bad nightmare, and the Fat Controller still uses both diesels and steamies, and Emily is also a very splendid engine on the island of Sodor.